Homeless man cleaned a rich lady's car windshield with his sleeve. What she gave him will make you cry. The Lagos sun blazed hot on the morning traffic, bouncing off car roofs like mirrors. At a busy intersection, horns blared impatiently as sleek SUVs and battered Danfos fought for space. Among the crowd, a man in tattered clothes stood on the roadside, his beard unkempt, his shoes nothing more than rubber soles tied with rope. His name was Emeka Chukwu, once a teacher, now invisible to the world. But today, instead of stretching out his hands for coins like the others, Emeka did something different. A black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon rolled to a halt at the light. The kind of car that announced its owner before the tinted windows even slid down. The driver was a uniformed chauffeur, but in the back seat sat a woman in her 30s, stylish and poised, her diamond earrings catching sunlight. Her name was Adana Obi, a wealthy businesswoman known across the city for her sharpness in deals and her cold, dismissive tone toward strangers. She was scrolling through her phone when she noticed, from the corner of her eye, movement outside her car. Emeka had walked up. He didn't beg. He didn't speak. Instead, he removed his threadbare shirt sleeve and began to wipe the dust and smears off her windshield. With slow, careful strokes, as if this act was the only dignity left for him to offer the world. The chauffeur frowned. "Madam, should I chase him away?" But Adana held up her hand. Something in her froze. The way he cleaned, not with desperation, but with quiet pride, unsettled her. It wasn't the first time beggars had harassed her at traffic lights, but none had done this. None had served instead of begged. Traffic lights ticked red to green. Cars moved. Horns screamed. Yet Adana's gaze lingered on the man, his face beaded with sweat, his sleeve blackened with grime. He didn't even look at her once. The driver pressed the accelerator, but Adana's voice cut through, "Wait." The car halted. Other drivers cursed behind them. Adana rolled down her window. For the first time, their eyes met. Emeka's eyes were not the eyes of a beggar. They carried a weight, of loss, of knowledge, of a story untold. "What are you doing?" Adana asked, her voice sharper than intended. "Cleaning," Emeka said simply, stepping back, as though ashamed of overstepping. "Why?" she pressed. The light flicked green again. More horns. The chauffeur was restless. Emeka lowered his gaze. "Because I can't beg. My hands still work." The words stunned her. Something stirred in her chest, a strange mix of irritation, respect, and curiosity. But before she could say anything else, the car behind them honked so furiously that her chauffeur drove forward. The G-Wagon surged ahead, leaving Emeka standing in the exhaust fumes. Adana turned in her seat, watching him shrink in the distance, that ragged figure still holding his sleeve in his hand like a badge of honor. She muttered under her breath, "Who are you?" The chauffeur glanced at her through the mirror, puzzled by her tone. And for the first time in years, Adana felt that the stranger outside her car had cleaned more than her windshield. He had disturbed something she thought was long dead inside her. That night, she couldn't sleep. His words, "Because I can't beg. My hands still work," echoed in her mind. Adana lay awake in her king-sized bed that night, staring at the ceiling while the hum of her air conditioner filled the silence. The silk sheets wrapped around her did nothing to calm the unease in her chest. She had attended a dinner earlier, surrounded by Lagos's elite, but not even the laughter, champagne, or empty conversations about real estate and politics had distracted her. All she could see was him. That ragged man with the tired eyes, wiping her windshield with the kind of care her own staff barely offered. And those words, "Because I can't beg. My hands still work." She turned to her side and sighed, annoyed with herself. Why did she care? She had built walls so high no stranger's eyes could pierce them. Yet his had. The next morning, Adana's chauffeur picked her up as usual. They cruised down the same busy road, traffic snarling as vendors tapped on windows with pure water, plantain chips, and phone chargers. She pretended to scroll through her phone, but her eyes darted toward the sidewalks, searching. And then she saw him again. Emeka. Same tattered shirt. Same dusty shoes. But this time, he wasn't cleaning windshields. He sat on a low concrete barrier, staring at the ground, clutching something in his hand, a tiny, tattered notebook. "Madam, should I increase speed?" her driver asked, noticing her gaze. "No," Adana said quickly. "Stop here." The chauffeur blinked. "Madam?" "I said stop." Reluctantly, he pulled over. Adana rolled down her window again. "You," she called. Emeka looked up, startled, almost defensive. But when he recognized her, his shoulders slumped slightly, as if he had expected never to see her again. "Yes, madam," he replied. "Come here." He walked over cautiously, gripping his notebook as though it were gold. Adana studied him. Up close, she could see the lines etched deep into his face, not just from hardship, but from years of carrying burdens no man should bear alone. "What's your name?" she asked. "Emeka." "Do you always wipe people's cars?" A faint smile tugged at his cracked lips. "Only when I see dust." The chauffeur frowned in the driver's seat. "Madam, don't waste time with this one. He will ask you for money soon." But Emeka shook his head. "I don't beg." Adana noticed the notebook again. "What's that?" He hesitated. "My lessons." Her brows rose. "Lessons?" He glanced down at the notebook and murmured, "I used to be a teacher. English and literature. This book, it reminds me of who I was. Who I am." Before life, he trailed off, ashamed. For the first time, Adana didn't see a beggar. She saw a man holding on to dignity with bleeding hands. "Teacher," she whispered, almost to herself. "Yes," Emeka said softly. "But now, I just clean windshields." The light turned green. Cars behind them blared horns. Adana's heart pounded. She wanted to ask more, but her driver accelerated. The G-Wagon pulled away again, leaving Emeka's figure shrinking in the mirror, but this time, she noticed something burning in his eyes. Not despair. Not shame. Hope. And that unsettled her more than anything else. That evening, Adana made a decision: she would return tomorrow, not as a passenger passing by, but to truly discover who this man was. The next morning, Adana dismissed her chauffeur. "I'll drive myself today," she said, sliding her designer sunglasses onto her face. The man looked alarmed. "Madam, you haven't driven yourself in years." "I said I'll drive." Her tone ended the conversation. She took the keys and guided the G-Wagon into the traffic-clogged streets of Lagos. But unlike other days, she wasn't heading to her office or to a meeting. Her eyes scanned the sidewalks, sharp and restless, searching. It didn't take long. Emeka was at his usual spot, sitting on the edge of a broken concrete barrier near the roundabout. His hands clutched that same worn notebook. Every so often, he would glance up at cars, as if deciding whether to approach, but most of the time he sat quietly, writing, his lips moving as though reciting lines only he could hear. Adana parked discreetly a few meters away and lowered her window slightly. She watched him with the curiosity of a hunter stalking prey. After a while, Emeka rose, tucked the notebook inside his shirt, and began walking. His gait was uneven, his shoulders slumped, but there was a strange discipline in his stride, like a man once used to standing tall. Adana started her engine and followed at a distance. He weaved through backstreets, past roadside mechanics and suya stalls, until he reached a cluster of abandoned buildings near the train tracks. Children ran barefoot in the dust, chasing tires, while women stirred pots of watery soup over makeshift stoves. It was a community of the forgotten, where poverty clung like a second skin. Emeka greeted some of the children with a smile, patting their heads. They brightened at the sight of him, running to hug his legs. "Teacher! Teacher!" they shouted in unison. Adana's breath caught. Emeka knelt, producing the tattered notebook. He began reading to them, his deep voice carrying fragments of poetry into the air. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." The children listened, wide-eyed, as though he were a magician weaving spells with words. He corrected their pronunciation, urged them to repeat after him, even laughed when one boy mispronounced soul as shoe. Adana's chest tightened. This was no ordinary beggar. This man was still teaching, still giving, even when he had nothing. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, admiration. But just as she was about to step out of her car, she noticed another figure approaching. A heavy-set man with a scar across his face. His clothes were neat but his eyes sharp, predatory. The children scattered at his approach. "Emeka," the man barked. Emeka rose slowly, his jaw tightening. "You still here, wasting time on these children? Did you forget the debt you owe?" the man snarled. Adana leaned forward in her seat, her heart hammering. "Debt? What debt?" The man jabbed a finger into Emeka's chest. "You think reading poems will feed you? Next week, I want my money. Or else." He let the threat hang before spitting on the ground and walking away. Emeka's shoulders slumped as the children returned cautiously, tugging his sleeve. He forced a smile for them, continuing the lesson as though nothing had happened. But Adana had seen it, the flicker of fear in his eyes. For the first time in her life, Adana felt compelled to interfere in a stranger's destiny. But how? Adana waited until the children dispersed, until Emeka tucked his notebook back into his shirt and began walking toward the rusted shanty that looked barely strong enough to shield him from rain. Her pulse quickened as she stepped out of her G-Wagon. The neighborhood froze. A luxury car and a woman dressed in silk and gold earrings didn't belong in this place. Mothers at the cooking fires stared. Men playing drafts on wooden boards stopped mid-game. Even the children went silent, eyes wide. Emeka turned at the sound of her heels striking gravel. When he saw her, he blinked in disbelief, almost as if he thought she was a mirage. "You?" he breathed. Adana folded her arms, masking her nerves with a cold facade. "I wanted to see for myself who you really are. Now I know. A man who teaches children with nothing but scraps of paper." His lips curved into a faint smile. "And you? A woman who chases beggars just to satisfy curiosity?" Her jaw tightened. "I told you, I don't waste time on beggars. You're different." Emeka looked away, embarrassed. "Different? Madam, I live in that shack. My mattress is the ground. My food depends on what little I earn wiping car glass. What could possibly make me different?" "Those children," Adana said firmly. "The way they called you teacher. The way you corrected their words. You're not like the others. You've held on to something most men in your condition would have lost, dignity." Silence hung between them. For the first time, Emeka's mask cracked. His eyes shimmered, but he blinked the tears back. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I was a teacher once. Senior secondary English at St. Mark's. I had a wife. A daughter. We lived in a small but happy home in Suralere." Adana felt her chest tighten. "What happened?" she asked softly. Emeka's shoulders slumped, as though carrying the weight of a decade on his back. "One accident. A truck lost its brakes on the expressway. My wife and daughter were in the taxi it crushed. Gone. Just like that. And me? I had nothing left to live for. I lost my job. My house. Everything fell apart. All I could cling to was this." He tapped his chest where the notebook was hidden. "Words. Lessons. Fragments of who I used to be. Adana's throat constricted. She had expected poverty, laziness, maybe bad choices. Not tragedy this raw, this merciless. He looked at her then, his voice trembling. So you see, madam. Don't waste your concern on me. I am just a ghost walking in daylight. For a moment, Adana couldn't speak. The walls she had built her entire life, against pity, against compassion, were crumbling. She had thought herself hardened, immune to other people's pain. But this man's story cut through her like glass. Before she could reply, a sudden shout echoed from behind. Teacher Emeka, one of the children cried, running toward him with panic in his eyes. Uncle Jude is coming back. Emeka stiffened, fear flashing across his face. Adana turned sharply. The same scar-faced man from earlier was striding down the street, flanked by two rough-looking men. Adana realized this was no ordinary debt collector, and Emeka's life was in far greater danger than she imagined. The air in the settlement thickened with tension as the scar-faced man approached, flanked by two hulking shadows. Mothers hurriedly gathered their children, pulling them inside makeshift shelters. Even the men who moments ago sat laughing over drafts scattered like frightened birds. Only Emeka stood still, shoulders squared but trembling ever so slightly. Emeka, the man's voice carried like thunder, rough and dripping with menace. Did you think I was joking last week? Did you think Jude is a man of idle threats? The name hit Adana's ears like a warning bell. Jude. Emeka swallowed hard. I told you, I don't have it yet. Give me time. Jude sneered, revealing a gold tooth. Time. You owe me 60,000 naira. Each day you delay, it grows. But look at you, still wasting your time teaching dirty street children poems. Where is my money? One of the thugs grabbed Emeka's collar, yanking him forward. The notebook tumbled from his shirt and hit the ground. A child screamed, no. Teacher's book, and darted forward, but Jude barked, stay back. The boy froze, shaking. Adana's fists clenched at her sides. Every instinct told her to turn away, get back into her car, and leave this madness behind. This wasn't her world. She was a woman of boardrooms and skyscrapers, not dusty alleys and hired fists. But something inside her refused to move. She found herself stepping forward. How much does he owe you? Adana's voice rang sharp, cutting through the chaos. All heads turned. Jude's eyes narrowed at the sight of her, a polished woman standing by a gleaming G-Wagon like she had descended from another planet. And who are you? Jude spat, stepping closer. His savior. Adana didn't flinch. Answer my question. 60,000, Jude sneered. But don't think paying it ends it. A man like this will always be a debt. He's worthless. He shoved Emeka backward. Emeka staggered but caught himself, fury flashing in his eyes. I am not worthless, he hissed. Jude laughed cruelly. Then prove it. Pay your debt. Adana reached into her handbag, fingers brushing against crisp naira notes. She could settle this with a single gesture. One flick of her hand and this nightmare would be over. But something stopped her. If she paid, would she not confirm Jude's words, that Emeka was a man who couldn't stand on his own? That he needed rescuing like a child? Her eyes darted to the notebook lying in the dust. The children's hopeful faces. Emeka's clenched jaw, his pride barely holding him together. She realized this wasn't just about money. This was about his dignity. Adana drew her hand back slowly. Instead, she said coldly to Jude, touch him again, and you'll answer to me. My name is Adana Obi. If you know Lagos, you know who I am. The name landed like a thunderclap. Even Jude hesitated. Everyone in Lagos had heard of Adana Obi, the woman who crushed rivals in courtrooms, the business magnate with enough wealth to ruin entire families. Jude's smirk faltered. He spat on the ground again but signaled to his men. This isn't over. They retreated into the shadows. Emeka exhaled shakily, retrieving his notebook with trembling hands. He looked at Adana, eyes burning with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "Why did you do that?" he whispered. Adana met his gaze, her voice softer now. "Because no man who still teaches children is worthless." Yet even as she spoke, Adana knew she had crossed a line. She was now tangled in Emeka's world, and walking away would no longer be an option. The settlement slowly returned to life after Jude's retreat, but whispers followed Adana like shadows. A woman of her stature had no business standing here, dust clinging to her designer heels, expensive perfume mixing awkwardly with the stench of kerosene and sweat. Emeka tucked his notebook into his shirt again, avoiding her gaze. "You shouldn't have interfered, madam. Now Jude will come back twice as angry. And he'll find me waiting," Adana said sharply. He shook his head. "You don't understand. Men like him don't care who you are. They don't stop until they've crushed you." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then let me help you. Tell me what you need. Food? Clothes? A place to stay?" "I can." "No." The word shot out of him like a blade. His eyes flashed, raw with pain. "I don't want your pity." Adana froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not staff, not rivals, not even men in power. Emeka's voice cracked as he went on, "I've lost everything already, my family, my home, my respect. If I take your charity, what's left of me will die too. Do you understand?" For a long moment, silence hung between them. Behind them, children peeked from doorways, watching as though their teacher's honor hung in the balance. Adana swallowed. Her instinct was to command, to solve, to throw money at problems until they disappeared. But this man, he wasn't asking for money. He was asking for something she had never given anyone before, patience. She tried again, softer this time. "I didn't come here to pity you. I came because when I saw you cleaning my windshield with your sleeve, I saw a man refusing to bow. That moved me. People with wealth, people like me, we don't bow, either. But the difference is, I fight with lawyers and contracts. You fight with nothing but a ragged sleeve and a notebook." Emeka looked at her then, really looked, as though seeing past her diamonds and car into the woman beneath. "I don't need saving," he said quietly. "But if you really mean what you just said, then maybe I need reminding that I'm still a man." Adana nodded slowly. "Then let me remind you. Not with money, but with opportunity." Emeka frowned. "Opportunity?" "Yes. Come with me tomorrow. Not as a beggar. As a teacher. I want to see what you can do if you're given more than dust to wipe away." His eyes widened. The thought terrified him. And yet, it lit a spark. But before he could answer, a shrill voice called out from across the street. It was one of the women, carrying a baby on her hip. "Teacher Emeka. Jude's boys are asking around. They say they'll be back tonight." Emeka's face darkened. His time was running out. Adana felt her pulse quicken. This was no longer about curiosity. If she didn't act, this man might not survive the week. Tomorrow's meeting might be Emeka's only chance, but would his pride let him take it? The following morning, Emeka stood at the gates of Adana's glass-walled office building, his faded shirt freshly washed, his notebook tucked firmly under his arm. The security guards eyed him with suspicion. He didn't belong among the gleaming cars and pressed suits that streamed through the gates. But when Adana's G-Wagon pulled up, their posture snapped straight. She stepped out, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her heels clicking against marble. She barely glanced at the guards. "He's with me," she said, motioning toward Emeka. Their jaws nearly dropped. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity, polished floors reflecting chandeliers, assistants rushing with files, the hum of phones and printers blending into the rhythm of wealth. Emeka's eyes darted everywhere, his rough sandals squeaking against the marble. He clutched his notebook tighter, shoulders hunched as if the grandeur itself might crush him. Adana walked briskly ahead but slowed when she noticed he wasn't keeping pace. "You've faced worse than shiny floors," she murmured without looking back. He straightened slightly. "I've never faced this kind of battlefield," he said, half to himself. Her lips twitched. "Every world is a battlefield. The rules just change." She led him into a large conference room. Inside sat half a dozen of her staff, sharp young executives in suits, all curious, whispering to one another as their boss walked in with a man who looked like he'd wandered in from the street. Adana took her seat at the head of the table. "This," she said, her voice crisp, "is Emeka. He will conduct a short session today." The staff exchanged bewildered looks. One of them, a young man named Chaik, muttered, "Madam, with respect, this man doesn't look like he belongs here." Emeka stiffened. Adana's gaze snapped toward Chaik. "And neither do half of you, until I gave you a chance. You will listen." Silence fell. Emeka stepped forward, palms sweating, his notebook trembling in his hands. He flipped it open, his voice shaky at first. Literature is not just words on paper. It is the soul of a people. Even when stripped of home, or family, or wealth, a man who carries words carries dignity. His voice grew stronger with each sentence. He quoted Achebe, Soyinka, and even fragments of his own writing. Slowly, the skeptical expressions of the staff softened. They found themselves leaning forward, caught in the unexpected authority of his words. When he paused, silence followed, not mocking silence, but respect. Adana's lips curved into the faintest smile. But then Chaik, still restless, leaned back in his chair. "All this is fine, but what does literature buy? Can it pay debts? Feed children? This is business, not poetry." Emeka's jaw tightened. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, he walked toward the window overlooking the busy city below. His reflection stared back at him, tattered clothes against skyscrapers. He turned, his eyes burning. "Poetry fed me when grief would have killed me. It fed those children when hunger almost stole their hope. If you cannot see the value in that, then perhaps you are poorer than I am." The room went still. Even Chaik had no reply. Adana rose, her voice cool but edged with steel. "This session is over. You've all just learned more in 10 minutes from a man with nothing than you've learned in years with me." Her staff sat in stunned silence. Emeka stood there, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of being heard again. But as the applause of his dignity echoed in the silence, Jude's threat still lingered. Adana knew the storm was far from over. By the time Emeka left Adana's office that evening, dusk had painted the Lagos skyline in shades of orange and violet. For the first time in years, he walked with a lift in his shoulders. He hadn't begged, hadn't cleaned glass. He had spoken, and people had listened. Adana, watching from her office window, saw it too. Something in him had shifted, and strangely, something in her had as well. But hope in Lagos is a fragile thing. As Emeka stepped into the street, a black SUV screeched to a halt beside him. The doors flung open, and out stepped Jude with two of his men. They blocked Emeka's path, their presence drawing curious stares from passers-by. "Teacher." Jude's voice boomed, mocking. "I hear you found new friends in high places. Is this where you hide now? Among people who mistake words for wealth?" Emeka's chest tightened. He glanced around. Dozens of eyes were watching. The pride he had just rediscovered trembled on the edge of collapse. Jude shoved him hard against the SUV. The notebook tumbled from his shirt again, pages fluttering on the ground. Laughter erupted from the men. Still holding on to this trash. Jude sneered, grinding his boot on a page. Do you think stories will pay me? He raised his voice to the crowd. This is your teacher, debtor, beggar, fool. The humiliation seared deeper than any wound. Emeka felt his fists clench, but he knew striking Jude would mean death. And then a new sound cut through the noise, the sharp slam of a car door. Adana was there. She strode across the street like a storm, her heels echoing against the pavement. The crowd parted instinctively. Her presence carried the weight of power, the kind that made men hesitate. Take your foot off that book, she commanded. Jude turned, amused. Ah, Madam Obi. You again. Are you the guardian angel of lost causes? Adana didn't blink. I told you once, touch him again, and you answer to me. Laughter rippled from Jude's men. And what will you do? Sue us. Adana's lips curved, but her eyes burned. If I must. Or I'll do worse. You think you're feared in these streets? I can erase your name from Lagos in 1 week. No one will trade with you, no bank will hold your money, no ally will stand by you. Test me, Jude. The crowd murmured. Everyone knew Adana Obi had ruined powerful rivals before. Jude's smirk faltered. For a long, tense moment, silence hung. Then, with a mocking bow, Jude stepped back, signaling his men. Enjoy your charity case, madam. But know this, your wealth can't buy him a spine. He will still crawl to me. They drove off, leaving dust and whispers in their wake. Emeka knelt, gathering his notebook with trembling hands. He couldn't meet Adana's eyes. You shouldn't have done that, he muttered. Adana crouched beside him, her voice low. I didn't do it for you. I did it because no man deserves to be broken in public. Not while I'm watching. But inside, she knew the truth, she had crossed another line. Jude would not forgive this. And now, her world and Emeka's were locked together in a war neither of them had asked for. That night, Emeka faced a choice, accept Adana's help and risk losing his pride, or reject her and face Jude's wrath alone. That night, Emeka sat alone inside his shack, the notebook spread open across his knees. The candle beside him sputtered in the breeze, casting long shadows against the cracked walls. His hands shook as he traced the words he had written earlier that day, dignity is the last garment of the poor. Lose it, and you are naked before the world. He closed the book with a sigh. Jude's laughter still rang in his ears. The sting of humiliation clawed at his chest, threatening to undo what little strength he had left. A soft knock startled him. He froze. No one ever came to him at night. Emeka. The voice was unmistakable. Adana. He hesitated, then opened the door. She stood there, not in her tailored suits but in a simple blouse and trousers. Even without her armor of wealth, she radiated authority. Behind her, the glow of her G-Wagon's headlights washed over the alley. May I come in? She asked. He stepped aside silently. She entered, her eyes sweeping the cramped space. The cracked floor, the rusted tin roof, the single mat on the ground. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing of pity. Instead, she sat on the mat, motioning for him to join her. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Emeka spoke, his voice low. You shouldn't be here. People will talk. Let them, she replied. I'm not here for them. I'm here for you. He laughed bitterly. For me. Madam, I am nothing but a ruin. Once, I had a family. Once, I had a purpose. Now. I'm just a man waiting for Jude to finish me. Adana studied him, her voice soft but firm. That's the lie you've believed. But I see something else. I see a man who teaches children when he has nothing. A man who cleans windshields not to beg, but to stand on his own feet. Do you know how rare that is? In all my wealth, I've never met a man who carries dignity the way you do. His eyes glistened. Dignity doesn't feed me. No, she admitted. But it's why I'm making you an offer. He frowned. What offer? She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. Come work for me. Not as a driver, not as a cleaner. As a teacher. I run a foundation, schools in rural areas, literacy programs. They need men like you. Men who still believe words can save lives. I'll clear Jude's debt, I'll give you a home, but in return, you must teach again. Emeka's breath caught. The offer was everything he needed, safety, purpose, redemption. And yet, fear gnawed at him. And if I fail, he whispered. Adana's voice softened. Then you fail standing, not crawling. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Emeka pressed his notebook to his chest, as if the pages themselves might guide him. Finally, he whispered, I'll do it. Adana smiled faintly, a smile touched by relief. Then tomorrow, your new life begins. Neither of them knew it yet, but Jude had overheard whispers of this decision, and he was already plotting his most vicious strike. The morning sun spilled across Lagos, gilding the skyscrapers in golden light. Emeka stood outside Adana's office tower, his notebook in hand, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Today was the day he would begin anew, not as a beggar, not as a debtor, but as a teacher once more. But fate rarely allows rebirth without trial. As Emeka stepped toward the building, a roar shattered the calm. Jude's SUV screeched to a stop at the curb. He leapt out with 4 men, their faces hard, their fists ready. Emeka. Jude bellowed. Did you think you could run? Did you think hiding behind Madame Obi's skirts would save you? Passers-by scattered. Guards at the building tensed, but Jude's men outnumbered them. Emeka's breath caught. This was it, the reckoning he had feared. Jude stormed forward, seizing Emeka by the collar. You owe me, and today you pay, with blood if not with money. Before Emeka could respond, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the chaos. Unhand him. Adana descended the steps of the building like a queen entering her court. Behind her, cameras from reporters clicked furiously, she had tipped them off. The scene was no longer a private shakedown. It was a stage. Jude froze, realizing too late the trap he had walked into. Adana's eyes blazed. This man owes you nothing. His debt is cleared. I purchased it last night. She tossed a folder onto the hood of Jude's SUV. Inside were contracts, signatures, and receipts. The crowd gasped. Jude's face drained of color. I own your debt now, Adana continued coldly. And let me make this clear, you will never touch him again. If you try, I will bury you so deep in lawsuits and police investigations you'll beg for prison. Jude's men faltered. The cameras flashed again, sealing his humiliation. For the first time, Jude had no words. He spat on the ground, muttered curses, and retreated with his men. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Adana turned to Emeka, her face softening. This, she said, holding out a set of keys, is my gift to you. Confused, Emeka took them. Keys. She gestured. A black Toyota Corolla stood parked nearby. But beyond that, she motioned to a banner being unfurled above the entrance of the building, Obi Foundation Literacy Center, head teacher, Emeka Chukwu. Emeka's knees buckled. His breath hitched as tears welled in his eyes. The children from his community appeared from the crowd, clapping and shouting, Teacher Emeka. He pressed the notebook to his chest, sobs breaking free. For years he had carried only grief, shame, and loss. Now he held dignity restored, not through charity but through trust, through purpose. Adana placed a hand on his shoulder. You wiped dust off my car when the world saw you as nothing. Today, I wipe dust off your past. Teach again, Emika. Live again. His tears spilled freely. Thank you, he whispered. And as the cameras flashed, the world saw not a homeless beggar, but a teacher reborn. Adana's gift was not money, not pity, but the return of Emika's identity, his place in the world, his dignity, his second chance.